Sweet greetings, self-declared Gnostics and friendly strangers. Today, I would like to present a short cooking demonstration for your entertainment and mine. This is Johnny Lishka once more, aka the Gnostic'Arrogator. First, let me thank all the viewers who enjoyed my previous video. I appreciate the positive feedback, but also accept any criticism my opinions may inspire. I found one comment, now deleted, to be especially instructive. It pointed out my rudeness, advised I, quote, deflate the snowflake ego, unquote, and to, quote, grow a Gnostic pair, unquote. I actually enjoy the impressions from this comment. It gives me an opportunity to practice the code of no offense. Not offended in the least. In truth, I would agree with the main point. I am rude. Incredibly rude. It's one of my more sophisticated traits, for all of the trouble it gets me into. Although I could just be blowing off a bit of hot air. As a fair warning, I may become more abrasive if I continue to talk about the hot button topics that I want to. Call it a gimmick or not. Well, I'm here to tell you today that I'm coming out as a staunch segregationist. Segregation, well, it was demonized around the time of the civil rights movement by you know who. Typical images of the evils of segregation include drinking fountains labeled colored only, and video footage of black students being escorted by cops for reasons that don't move me to investigate. My argument is that there actually is such a thing as good segregation. Segregation that serves benign or beneficial purposes to life, art, and pleasure. What I would call syntropic and probiotic segregation is severely lacking in today's society. I'm going to try to demonstrate the benefits of segregation in action with a simple egg. Eggs like this chicken egg contain two distinct components, yolk and albumin, but I'm going to call it white, as a nod to its racial significance. A culinary trick popularized by the French is called separating the egg, but you could just as easily call it segregating the egg. There are a couple of ways you can accomplish this. You can use a tool designed to hold the yolk while the white spills through, or just use your fingers. I've always cracked delicately and used the eggshell, which can sometimes be awkward. What's the purpose? Let's start with the egg white. You might know that you can transform a small amount of egg white into fluffy clouds of meringue with some intense whipping. But you need pure egg whites to do this. One yolk or a drop of yolk can throw the entire process off, and you will not get the volume of fluffy white clouds. Also, this is best done in either a glass or metal bowl with a metal whisk, as even plastic bowls will cause an undesirable reaction with the whites. So it looks like I'm making some large, chunky meringue cookies that turned out weird from an oven mishap. And initially, I tried fluffing it by hand, but deferred to superior technology. The same concept of segregation also applies to the noble yolk. A number of recipes call for yolks exclusive of whites, such as some custards and creme brulee. I worked for several months at my friend's ice cream shop. They used organic eggs, milk, cream, all that good shit to make the finest ice cream from scratch that I've ever tasted anyway. I was their number one customer. They made their ice cream with what they told me was a French style, using egg yolks and no whites. And each batch required a dozen or so of these yolks. So every week they would go through hundreds of eggs, easy, segregating out the yolk and disposing of the whites. It wasn't until I tipped them off on a waffle recipe which called for fluffed egg whites that they actually started saving them and had some use for them. Now, with the two results of egg segregation, a third option becomes possible, demonstrated here with the soufflé. A soufflé requires that you first segregate the egg. You make a bechamel sauce with the yolk, and then fluff the white and gently fold them in. It demonstrates the power of integration through initial segregation, conditioning each separate ingredient before selectively combining. Surprisingly, my trial attempt looked better than the one I'm demoing here. Well, I'll be damned. Soufflés are notorious for deflating, but this is usually due to some chef error. Here, the bechamel sauce that I made the second time around, I used less flour, and it was runnier and harder to fold with the egg whites. Tuck. All right now, so what's the point? I like to compare this metaphor to a diagram I drew up to represent how SA, PT, and KT ought to be arranged in correlation to one another. The shapes are stylized, although they don't have to be. You can convey the same message with a standard circular Venn diagram. I drew PT in an ovular shape, similar to the Shakti cluster, and KT is a smaller oval within the sphere. SA is an augmented shape that stems out of PT. The way I drew it here is almost like a leaf sprouting out of a seed, with some overlap. SA, by my standards anyway, and I believe the main professor has already concurred with me on this basic point, does not incorporate the rituals of KT. There is already enough technical jargon in PT that will be excluded from SA. Well, there you have it. Think of PT as the egg white meringue, SA as the yolky creme brulee, and the place where they overlap as the carefully integrated soufflé. The only thing here is that my soufflé deflated, and I count that as a failure. But even a mistake like this indicates how integration can be very problematic. When I consider the enforced integration that kicked off with the civil rights movement and continues to this very day, I see it as a complete disaster. Improperly mixing contrasting or conflicting elements is as bad as a ruined soufflé, if not worse. Just a tasty introduction. Start you out with a savory tidbit before going into the bitter and sour details. Why I think segregation is part of the solution.